Welcome to the Lovecars On The Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On The Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. What a weekend of motorsport. So much action, so much going on. There's Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. There's supercars from Melbourne. It all happened down under. Indycar, which was just epic. MotoGP from Argentina and NASCAR from Richmond. And Caterham Racing, of course, we'll come on to.
Never forgetting Caterham Racing.
But first, Tiff, the million-dollar question. Formula 1, our beloved sport. Is it a sport now or is it entertainment?
Well, I mean, sadly, I think it's the latter. But I think before we just go on to what happened in the race and where we're at, I mean, it's worth just looking back slightly over the history of Formula 1 to see how we've ended up where we are. Because back in the 70s, when I loved it, you know, there was that 9 different teams could win every race and Lord Hesketh could build his own racing car and win a Grand Prix. Because it was a simple formula with sort of mechanical guys. And then aero arrived with ground effect in 1979-80. And ever since then, the cars have just been getting more and more high-tech, you know, more and more brilliant aero design. And that's the way it's gone on and on. And of course, you know, in 2010, the more clever aero comes in, the less you can follow the car in front. So that's been the development since the sort of very mechanical era of the 70s to the aero-dominated era we have now. So when in 2010, you know, Fernando Alonso couldn't overtake, what was it? It was the Russian, wasn't it? Petrov. He couldn't get by him in Abu Dhabi to claim the world championship. So everyone thought, this is ridiculous. You know, cars cannot overtake. And of course, that was also another part of our world I would criticize when they were at the Tilke circuit, it was Abu Dhabi. And I think a lot of the fault, they've gone to sort of, you know, artificially create overtaking, but without really addressing the circuits, which I think the circuits have had too many corners. So look, Tilke pretty, turn. Yes, it looks lovely. But you can't overtake unless you've got a corner, reasonable straight, another corner. So the track's the one thing. So aero got more and more dominant. DRS was then introduced the following year, 2011. It's now, 12 years of DRS.
Wow.
Because everyone says, well, this is ridiculous. We got a formula and nobody can overtake, which I agreed. You know, aero was ruining it. But instead of changing the cars, they loved their aero, so the rules were, you know, more freedom. I think at this point, you have to point out there are still those on Twitter that want even more freedom. The real tech guys, they love the tech. They want a Grand Prix car to the most advanced supersonic, super tech car in the world. And I understand that's their viewpoint. And loads like myself and all those on Twitter that say, well, I'm giving up watching Formula 1. To be honest, I'm giving it up. You know, want real racing where it's more of a driver and not more the car, because nowadays the car is so dominant. It's 98% the car and 2% the driver. I'm exaggerating. But so this went on, and as I said to them, there has got more and more dominant. We then had the Ross Brawn regulations, which I and many others were conned into believing that he was determined to get rid of DRS. And yet this new formula came out where the cars can follow a little closer, but still can't overtake without DRS. So that's where we're stuck at the moment. And as much as we moan about we should have DRS, the next set of regulations, looking at 2026, already little is going to change. So it's this, I'm building up to the fact we're just going to have to virtually accept them. 2026, they say the cars are going to be lighter and shorter. There's some engine regulations, a lot more electric power is going to be involved, less from the fuel-powered engine. And Ross Brawn even said, they're talking about having active aero. So literally they can slow down the leader by reducing his aero in the middle of the race.
Absolutely ridiculous. What are they thinking?
But probably, I mean, it all came to a head really at the famous Abu Dhabi, you know, 2 years ago, because Liberty now owned it. And Liberty said, we want exciting racing. And the pressure was on poor old Massey, you know, we must race to the finish line. And Bernie had actually started it years earlier when he created the end of the safety car, was just before the last corner. So when the safety car was released, we had this view of people overtaking into the last corner. So then at least the cars would cross the line at full throttle and not be following a safety car. That was Bernie's way of getting out of the embarrassment of a race finishing, you know, with cars cruising by behind a pace car.
It doesn't happen that often, though. 2020 Monza, I think, was the last time it finished under
a
safety car.
Well, I know, but it just, when it happens once, they all panic. Gosh, we have to have racing. And so, you know, this is when Massey was under pressure. You know, Red Bull say, win a race. We want a race. a massive. So I've given you a race. Well, of course, you all know it's a one-handed race because one had brand new tires and the other didn't. So we got this huge pressure now on the FIA officials to create a race at the end. And then we look, we'll talk about the IndyCar race later on, but everybody poo-poos IndyCar because they say, oh, it's a single make, it's a spec car. Well, that's old-fashioned rubbish. Although they do have two different engines. They got both Chevrolets and the other one, Ford Honda. But although they say, it's just spec cars, you've still got to have the best aerodynamicists and the best engineers to win IndyCar. So it's dominated by, Penske, Ganassi, Aaron McLaren and Andretti. But, you can have a team like Rahal Letterman, a really experienced team with a spec car. And in qualifying for the Texas race, they were 4 miles an hour slow. Their 3 drivers were the back 3 on the grid. And in the race, they were getting overtaken like they were standing still. Now, that's a spec car because their aerodynamicists and engineers can't get that little tweak right. So it's not a simple spec car. It still needs brilliant designers to get the best out of them. But of course, if you give those brilliant designers a completely clean sheet, and you've got Mr. Newey's brilliant aero team at Red Bull, the wider the regulations, the wider the gap will be between the top car and the second.
Look, Tiff, there's a balance. There's a balance to everything, isn't there? And I think the balance is wrong in the aero department at the moment. And I think the balance is wrong in terms of the size. And I would love the balance to shift much more to being about the driver.
But it's not.
The car.
It's not going to happen. This is the trouble because
so we can moan and complain all we like,
exactly.
The purists like us, but it's going to be here to stay, and they're probably going to make it more dramatic and even go for more entertainment if that is possible.
Yeah.
But
I mean, to give Liberty and Formula One their dues, I mean, it was the biggest crowd ever at Melbourne, whereas the Texas race had loads of empty seats in the grandstand. So Texas was watched by race enthusiasts, and Melbourne, like more and more Grand Prix, are watched by people. I want to go to a Grand Prix. What's a Grand Prix? Grand Prix, is it? And wow, this is the place to be.
Yeah, but it's a different audience, the US audience and the global audience of Formula One. And I have to say, my sister was there with her family. She said it was amazing. She said
Melbourne.
In Melbourne, said it was. They live in Sunshine Coast, but they said it was easy to get around. The atmosphere was amazing.
But then the atmosphere. But you see them all standing on those banks, just watching cars go by on a straight line behind, and they go back on Monday to work. So, wow, it was amazing. What a weekend we had at Melbourne. We were there. And that's what Liberty want it to be. They want it to be the event, whether it's at Miami or Vegas or Monte Carlo. And therefore, places like Spa and the French circuits are getting pushed off the calendar because they haven't got the razzmatazz.
That'd be such a shame on Formula One if that ever does happen. If Spa and these historic circuits go, it'd be a shame on Formula One. And then I do think there will be a big shift of people like us that will say, you know what, enough's enough.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of people on Twitter say. So anyway, so we get to the Australian, and this is why the pressure is built up on the officials to make the racing, to create the racing. So now they almost seem to want to have a red flag as soon as they can, because the pressure is to make sure they race to the finish. And in my opinion, I think most of the drivers would say neither red flag was necessary. They're overreacting safety-wise, getting carried away. And, the first one, Albon, was a bit of Tech Pro damage. Someone says you had to have a red flag because I had to repair the Tech Pro. Well, just go round and round with a safety car, repair your Tech Pro, release and race again.
But they didn't have to do that. They said it was about it wasn't about the barrier,
gravel.
It was about the gravel.
Gravel.
They got to make their mind up. I think that. Do you know what? I think they put that in there just to make themselves sound a bit better. And yes, we had to replace the Tech Flow, but even if they did have to repair it, not replace it. Even if they did, that's what a safety car's for. Look at IndyCar. We'll come on to that in a moment. They've got road sweepers and they've got pickup trucks and all sorts under
dryers and blowers.
Yeah,
all the money, all the one Formula One spend, they must get better. But I mean, the trouble is with this: if you go this way, you ruin Grand Prix racing. Grand Prix racing is about a long 2-hour race with strategy. Because George had decided to change tires, but as soon as the yellow flags went out, the safety car, he didn't expect a red flag, and therefore it screwed his race because they went red flag and not staying on the safe. So you don't know as a team manager now what the hell the bloody organizer is going to do.
But I think, Tiff, there's a simple solution to that, and don't allow people to change tyres under a red flag.
Well,
so
they might have a carbon fibre. They might have a bit of carbon fibre in them. That's all safety.
Well, okay. Well, they're going to have a 10-second penalty or whatever the pit stop is, or whatever. they can't. I think that rule has to change where you can make any alterations to the car under red flag, because look at Abu Dhabi, look at yesterday with George and Carlos. It's just not fair on those drivers that are in prime position, and then they, because of lap of the gods of the FIA, they lose out. It's not fair.
Yeah. But I'd also say don't let them pit under virtual safety car or safety car. America, they close the pit roads.
Absolutely.
You can't come in during a full course yellow. So that would keep the sort of order in the meritocracy, and nobody would get, you lose a race because the virtual safety car comes out, and the guy that was 10 seconds behind you nips into the pit, changes his tires, comes out ahead of you. And you think, well, that's just because of a virtual safety. But yet it was a great Grand Prix. That's the saddest thing.
Let's start with qualifying. Sergio Perez didn't really get off the start.
I don't know mechanically, because actually in the race, Max was complaining he was locking up his fronts at one. He went off on the grass and he was leading. And of course, Sergio is saying, my front's like, I don't know, because of course it's fly-by-wire brakes. And obviously in the olden days, we lock your fronts, I'd turn my little knob and put a bit more balance on the rear. My fronts wouldn't lock anymore. Now, I don't know how adjustable the drivers have. Instead of, if the fronts are locking, surely they can do something to put more brake bust, because it depends on where your battery level is, because that's what the computer does with fly-by-wire. If your battery's empty, the brakes have to be mechanical, and the battery's the other way around. If the battery's empty, you get a lot of deceleration. So it's a bit of a weird thing. But so off was Perez, which gave us all a bit of a smile, to be honest, most of us, to see what run the other Red Bull. It also meant that, Max was now at the mercy of having to fight two Mercedes up front. Despite my telling them they should have had one on softs and one on mediums, the idiots at Mercedes put them both on medium. But George made that start, and so did Lewis and Max. And we thought, oh, we're going to
push me off the track. He pushed me off the track. Oh, the amount of times Max did that on other people, by the way.
But then, George did his early pit stop. As soon as the yellows went out, you thought he'd jump in and go to the white tires. And then, of course, the red flag, which ruined George's strategy completely. Then when it was just, Max against Lewis, I mean, that DRS overtake, I think he was 4 lengths ahead of, before they got to the corner, he not only passed Lewis, he was 4 car lengths. I mean, it's all down to, it's brilliant by the Red Bull aerodynamics. Their team has come up with this, and it just works incredibly well.
Did you hear Crofty? It was so embarrassing. He said, right, let's see what Lewis Hamilton's going to do to defend. Is he going to come back at him? And already, like you said, he's 4 cars past.
Max was gone. I mean, and I certainly don't think any rules should be changed this year as well. People clamour to, this is what Liberty be saying now. They'll be saying, well, can't we pull them back a bit? This is what the aero, Ross Brawn's new active aero. Let's handicap the better. You can't do that. The brilliant Red Bull car is going to dominate this year, and we just have to accept it. No point in complaining about it. But even after the Albon red flag, I thought towards the end of the race.
Can we just go back to the Albon red flag? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tiff, but after that red flag, there was almost a pile-up before they even restarted under the safety car. Did you see that around the corner?
The guys at the back, when they were slow,
one had to go across.
Know why were they backing up so much? Someone sort of 15th was just going very slowly. Maybe they wanted to go faster later in the parade. Yeah, that was dangerous again, because they're all out of control. I mean, we have to have a new regulation about the average speed when following a pace car. But they just keep on writing a new regulation. Every time anything goes wrong, they write a new regulation. And then they've got so many regulations, they don't know which one to use when it comes to the final round. I don't even know what happened at the end. But all I know is that in the middle of the race, we had what I would say was a great Grand Prix going on. Max had disappeared. He's in the best car. Okay, he's going to win.
Yeah.
But then you had Lewis and Alonso. Alonso constantly, I was looking at 1 second gap. You had that going on.
Yeah.
Can Alonso chip. Behind him, you had Sainz with Gasly, bringing Gasly with brilliant drive going on. This is Grand Prix racing, strolling around in his not so quick Aston Martin. Perez making his recovery. He got up to about 7th, I think. By then he was behind Stroll. But did he get the Stroll? I can't remember. And then Lando dragging his slow, tardy McLaren as fast as he could. And Hulkenberg, the brilliant Hulk then. I mean, Nico Hulkenberg, what I mean, I've got to change my opinion and go back and delete a few tweets about what I thought about Hulkenberg, because I thought he wouldn't be any better than K-Mag, and why not put a young driver in instead? But he's been fantastic this year. So we actually had 7 different manufacturers in the top 9 places,
Amazing.
all just, waiting for the tyre degradation, maybe something to change. And if it had finished like that with no more overtaking, I wouldn't have minded. That's a Grand Prix. That's what the Grand Prix are. It's not a Formula Ford race or a caterer race where everyone's overtaken at every corner. So, it would have been a great Grand Prix, and then poor old K-Mag clipped the wall. And some spectator quickly, I think, they cut their armband. A bit of carbon fibre went over the fence, I read this morning, and landed on someone's arm and cut them. So nothing's ever safe. I think this is the other thing we have to worry too much about, everything making too safe. You can't ever cover everything. So no, then they had that other crash, and then it just all got silly. And
well, it came a bit of a farce. Even all the drivers said it was. What's going on here? It's a bit of a mess. To quote Max Verstappen,
cruised across the finish line under wave yellows.
The first race in history, Formula One race in history, to have 3 red flags, I believe.
Was it?
Yeah, I know.
And those bloody juggernauts, into tight corners. These 1-ton juggernauts they're now driving. They're not the easiest things to be when you're all 3 abreast and 3 wide and locking cold tyres or colder tyres. I mean, I don't know why they invented that starting grid start for restarts either. I don't know who came up with that for more drama. Bring more, because we got dull racing. Formula One's getting dull. How do you make it? Change the circuits for one, and then hopefully change the cars. But that's not going to happen in the near future, I'm afraid. I don't know when the next rules might be. 2030 after 2026. But there were some. I mean, Alex Albon was a great story till he lost it.
What do you mean there was? There's a lot of drama. There's huge amounts of drama. Yeah. We haven't even come on to Carlos Sainz. For those of you who haven't heard his radio message when he was given a penalty for causing an incident. Oh, the emotion on the guy. Please, don't you wait until afterwards. Speak to me afterwards, because of course it took him out of the points after having a brilliant day. It took him down to 12th place out of the points.
I didn't even look at the results after it all. I virtually went and had a cup of tea. I thought, oh my god!
But it's funny. I think people like me want some consistency, and there doesn't seem to be that much consistency, because Logan Sargent did the same. He caused an accident going into the corner. I can't remember. I think he might have hit Williams or something, or whoever he hit, but no further action. So he spanned the car, almost identical situation to what Carlos Sainz did. But because he's in P20, they didn't give him any penalty whatsoever. Yeah. Which there's got to be some sort of consistency. I like Fernando.
Stroll tapped Leclerc off at turn 1.
Yeah,
I think it was a bit of a pinch. It was a bit of a pinch. I think he was a bit pinched between Alonso and Leclerc, but
he was actually, and that was from in my very humble opinion. It was nothing to do with Stroll. He literally had nowhere to go.
Well, yeah.
But it was. I like what Fernando Alonso wrote on Twitter afterwards about Lewis. He said, "Mega drive Lewis." I thought that was really nice, because they did. That was what racing's about. Forget Max; he was gone. He was gone in the amazing Red Bull. But of course, the podium.
And Jenson Button made it a much better Grand Prix. Apologies to Martin Bundle. I mean, Martin can come in, has a different style. I so enjoyed listening to Jenson. He very laid back. He chuckled about a few things, didn't he? And I thought he took some of that hype out of the commentary that tends to happen a bit more with others, especially obviously lead commentators, whose statistics are getting. Well, he was going on and on about Yuki Tsunoda having 3 11th places, was it, on the trot, and how exciting that would be. The first time in history anybody's finished in the same place. Oh, Crofty just
finished 11th place in a row. I mean, there are a couple of stats I'm going to drop with you, because I know you love stats so much. But it's the first time since Hungary that you had 3 world champions on the podium. Back in Hungary 2018, Deb Lewis, Kimi. That's a bit boring, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think about this then? So for those of you that watch Sky, the introduction, the credits, when they're showing who's on what row of the grid, they go through, and these drivers, they show some emotion and smile. They're all doing the most sultry, miserable poses you've ever seen in your life.
I don't watch that
until it got to Carlos Sainz, and fair play actually on row 3 was Lance Stroll as well. They're the only two to crack a bit of a smile, but all the others, come on guys, give us a smile.
Where are they going
Damn.
next? Anyway, I'm exhausted.
Azerbaijan in a few weeks' time.
Oh, the huge long straight. Yeah, they have a sprint race, aren't they? Which should be that around those tight, very tight 90-degree corners at Azerbaijan. So yeah, it's a shame. I think if it hadn't been for that last red flag, we would have said that was a really good Grand Prix. There'd just been
I thought it was a good Grand Prix. I just want some consistency from the FIA. Who got driver of the day? Who got your vote? And who do you think got the public's vote?
Oh, I don't know. I never looked at that. I would have given Gasly.
Would you really?
Yeah.
Well, it's the
Well,
first time,
hanging in there.
First time Gasly and Ocon, of course, came together. I don't think that'd be the last time, and it was just one of those instances.
Yeah,
Gasly.
that was.
Do you know what? I'm a Lewis fan, but my hand on my heart, if I wasn't, I would say Lewis probably had the driver of the day, driving that Mercedes, drove us to defend against.
Yeah, but I mean, it qualified second and third.
Yeah,
so,
true. Okay,
finished.
so I'll go.
I'm not sure when did Gasly qualify. I'm not sure, but he wasn't in the top.
The public
10.
gave it
he was
to Perez. Which...
Oh, did they? What? What did he do?
So if Max started where Perez did, Max would have won the race.
Yeah, Max wouldn't have been 8th or 9th. Where did Perez end up in the official results?
I think he was 6th or something.
Well, he overtook the two because the Pink Panthers didn't go in the
It
restart.
was all very confusing because of the.
Oh, he got 5th, but it should have been about 6th or 7th.
Because Carlos got the penalty, so it's all very confusing with the restart and the penalties. But there you go. A very interesting Australian Formula One.
And that's Formula One for you, boy. That's that sadly is where it's going to be. More and more rules, more and more confusion, more and more protests. And the fuss about Max's grid position for that last restart, wasn't it? When his tyres were right on, just touching a bit of the white line.
But I mean, he's silly doing that because he's so far in front. Look at it. I mean.
He said he couldn't see it. Apparently, the sun was very low. I don't know.
That's not an excuse. No. Ignorance isn't an excuse in a court of law. You can't go and say, I didn't see it or I didn't know about that. That's not an excuse. You're a driver, you've got a responsibility. Come back a foot before if you can't see it. But it just goes to show the dominance of the Red Bull because he could do that. And what if he got a penalty? He still would have run the race. And even when he came off, went off into the grass. I mean, there's unheard of for a lead driver to come off in the grass and still.
Well, he spun in Hungary, didn't he, about 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Remember, he lost
not
it.
that long ago, yeah.
But anyway, Formula 2, Formula 3,
Formula 2. Come on.
So much. We'll just do the Indycar because that's the contrast to me was just massive. So
it was brilliant.
If you're just a racing fan, I mean, that Texas race was just, scary to watch. And I think that 3 lead changes on the first lap. I think they were up to about 23 lead changes as they got towards the end. And it was a shame that they took a pace car across the finish line because Roman Grosjean was the race of his life. Roman was, he led for a while, but he had better tyres in the front 3, but he was trying to sort out this amazing David Malukas, who shows that in IndyCar. That's what I like about IndyCar because yes, the big teams have the best engineers, best aerodynamicists, and it's normally up front. It's normally what the Ganassis and McLarens and Penske's. Here's Malukas, this little Dale Coyne, outfit with half the budget probably of the leading teams. He's up there in 4th place, battling for a 21-year-old, can come from nowhere. But Grosjean hit the wall and the yellow flags came out, so Newgarden beat. And Pato O'Ward was probably the moral win. Everybody thought he was the quickest man that day.
He was amazing. That sort of the third quarter where he just dominated. He looked like he was a second lap quicker than everyone else. So, and then Texas Speedway, because I watched this for once, is an oval, and the speeds that these guys are doing. You got 28 cars on the track, and the speeds they're doing 220 miles an hour, and they're inches away from each other. It is just I've never seen anything like it. Actually, it was just crazy.
On occasion, there's fuel saving against the Formula E people. Keep on pointing that out. The Formula, yes, if there's a yellow 60 laps from the end of the race and the petrol tank will only do 57 laps, there's big decisions which happen in this race as to whether or not, what do you do? Do you lose track position or do you refuel? And so, yes, there were people out front that had to back off because Pato O'Ward had to do it. He thought he was going to lose the race. Luckily, another yellow allowed him to fill up and have full fuel for the run to the finish. So you will get times when people are having to fuel save. But that's only because they've played that tactic. They've chosen not to pit and had full fuel. So whatever. So there's lots goes on in IndyCar. And it was stunning, just breathtaking to watch.
I think that's the word, breathtaking. I think over 20 odd different leaders, and it's just the pace. And then, of course, when an accident happens, which it does frequently in that, blimey, you're just thinking, is that guy going to be okay? In big old crunches. And when they hit the back wall, which inevitably they do quite often, the suspension goes straight away, and then they've got no control over the car, so then it goes across all the other cars. But
Graham Rahal came across that guy, with broken suspension, just veered up the track straight into him and went over the top of him slightly.
And I just mentioned earlier about the sweeping the track. So mid-race, they're sweeping the marbles off the high side to make it more exciting for the end of the track. But they've got all this going on. So they're recovering cars with tow trucks. They're sweeping the road, and they're going around at a half decent pace with the safety car. So it's because we've had a major incident in Formula One. Now it's gone safety crazy.
Too far. But they ruined all the stuff, after that awful crash in Japan, they put all the chicanes in everywhere, more corners, But I think Formula One could be a lot better if I redesign most circuits, bypassed a quarter, reduced corners from 24 down to about 16. It would be much better.
And on the Formula One side of things, I think in terms of safety, yes, the Alex Albon incident yesterday that caused the red flag, if that was in the pouring rain and wet, great, do a red flag. But when you've got perfect visibility, dry track, absolutely no need whatsoever to red flag it, in my opinion.
I know. And changing all the tyres when they come in, it almost annoys me seeing all these drivers walking around, chatting to everybody in the middle of a race. Maybe they should stay in the car. It's compulsory. Stay in your car.
Well, yeah, if it's about 2 hours, then stay in your car. Okay, so we agree unanimously. I don't watch much IndyCar, but my goodness, I enjoyed that.
The point is not every race is like this. This is always what annoys me. There'll always be dull IndyCar races, dull Formula 2, dull NASCAR races, dull Formula 1. Then there'll be great Formula 1 and great. It's not consistent, but, IndyCar to me is more like... And the other thing about IndyCar, they are ground effect cars. But because that's controlled, because it's a spec ground effect car, they can follow inches behind and lose very, very little grip. So, but obviously they haven't got as much grip. They haven't got, Formula One car, I think it's about 3 tons of downforce at 200 miles an hour. They're sucking their car into the ground. Whereas, Indy car is probably only got about 1 ton of downforce sucking. So it's less, but it's a ground effect car that they can follow and race and overtake.
So if you haven't
they've got pushed to pass. They've got pushed to pass on road courses.
If you haven't seen IndyCar on the television, but the oval's it's hard to follow a little bit in terms of the camera work, but then they've got this wonderful 360 camera that just shows you how close they get. They're literally rubbing wheels at 220 miles an hour.
Oh, that's good.
And the 360 camera follows all the way around. Where we go next? We go back to Australia.
We go back to Melbourne. Back to Australia, because there's some great support races. The Melbourne crowd had a fantastic weekend of motorsport to watch. If you manage to get to a corner where you could watch and not just stood on the straight, watch them anyway. That's for them to choose, I guess. Formula 2 was dominated really by the Japan's Ayumu Iwasa, who looks like a real talent for the future. He managed to qualify on pole in these horrible wet conditions. They had really awful conditions in their qualifying, and very few of them crashed, which was quite surprising. He didn't go so well in the sprint race because he started 9th on the grid because the reverse grid. He had a puncture early on and finished 13th, but he dominated the main race to come up to lead the championship ahead of Teo Porcher, who came second. Dennis Hauger, the Dane, won the sprint race from pole because he was the 10th fastest. I know I always get upset by it. But he actually did a brilliant race. Hauger, from winning the sprint race, to me, wasn't his best drive. Because in the main race, he came from 10th on the grid, which is where he qualified, to be running third, when on the end of the pace car had gone in, and coming up to that final left-right, when the leader had gone, Iwasa had punched the throttle and disappeared, Victor Martin, the French kid, who's a bit of a wild child, reputation growing, locked up and just punted Hauger. So 4th hit the back of 3rd, took them both out of the race before they even got back to the restart. So lots of it was good stuff, great racing. Ollie Behrman.
They don't have pace cars in F2, don't you, Tiff?
I was just full course yellow then. Didn't have a safety car. Sorry, got carried away, Indy. Carried away. Well, this is the funny thing about Formula. Throughout the history, they wanted to copy some things the Americans do, but never wanted to use the same terminology to look like their company. And that's why, the safety car became a safety car. We can't use the word pace car. That's what the Americans do. But now, of course, they're copying more and more American tricks to make the racing exciting.
And we didn't actually say, we said how exciting the IndyCar race was with 20 or different changes of the lead. But we did actually confirm that it finished under safety car, which under pace car.
And it happens. It happens. Well, they all know that. It happens.
Yeah.
Our only Brit, our talented Brit, I think very talented Brit, Ollie Bearman, continues his learning curve of Formula 2. When it was raining where this qualifying, so it was really wet. And he jumped from 19th to 6th on his last lap in the wet before the session was actually red flagged because Martin, talking about wild child, Martin had crashed. So the session was ended about 2 minutes early. So he leapt from 19th to 6th. He started the sprint race in 5th. He failed a little bit, but took 7th off his teammate, more experienced Vesti at the last lap, finished 7th. Then in the main race, he started 6th, got up to 5th, I think. But he did push Zane Maloney wide at turn 1 a bit, got a 5-second penalty. Then he came into the pits. His team got into 4th, and coming up the pits, he got clobbered by the French guy, Hadjar, which punctured his car coming out the pits in 4th place for the restart. And he got back up to 12th. So Ollie Bearman's still learning, but results will come. There you go.
He's still young, but so are lots of other very talented people from all over the world.
Well, we got in Formula 3, we've now got 5 drivers in Formula 3. So it's not just, I apologise to overseas listeners that we concentrate on the Brits because, well, we're a British team and we can't concentrate on everybody. So we always follow the British drivers wherever they go. But in Formula 3...
we respect any driver, wherever they're from.
The winners, it doesn't mean to say they'll all go on. But the Formula 3 race, again, this is modern safety coming in because it's only a 15-lap race or 18 lap the sprint race, first race. And there were just so many full course yellow safety cars. Safety cars, got it right. I think they had about 2 laps when the DRS was enabled. And the Formula 3 DRS didn't really help them, even though they had 4 DRS zones. Overtaking was almost impossible in those Formula 3 cars, except for like the first couple of laps when everyone went crazy and everyone ended up in the gravel traps. And this is another safety thing I think we have to look at, is when a car has gone through the gravel and is parked right up against the wall, so well off the circuit, we've got to stop using a safety car and recovering cars. I know, oh gosh, can't leave a car there. But I think in certain circumstances, we can. Get the driver and the marshals back behind the fence, go again. You could just have a zone, just a 60-kilometre zone, or at least
what happens if you go into that car 100 miles an hour?
Well, you hit it. You're going to hit the you're going to hit the barrier at 100 miles an hour. You might as well hit a car out.
No.
And I remember it was always funny in Formula 4 days. My chaotic Formula 4 days was a famous Midlander, Ron Overend, who did the driver's briefing, clerk of the course. He used to say, if you're going to park your car, lads, make sure you park it somewhere really safe because some other bugger will come and hit it. It did, but I can't remember ever an accident getting worse because a car got off and hit a car that was parked.
Obviously, it will damage the park. You can't.
Well, you can't take any chance. But do you want to race then? Can you take a chance of racing?
No, absolutely.
You might injure yourself.
Yeah, but there's
how far do we go on and on and on with its safety?
I don't think you can race with a car on the side of the road unless it's out of the way.
Behind the gravel track, you've got the gravel trap to still slow, not on the edge of the road. Obviously, there has to be certain, common sense.
That's what we need. That's what we need. Common sense.
Yeah, can't have common sense. You have to have another rule and another rule, another rule. If the car is 22.5 meters off the circuit, there must be a full. If a car is 23 meters off the circuit, we can leave it.
That's what we need. You're absolutely right, because every single incident is different. I mentioned Logan Sargent and Carlos Sainz. It's a different incident. Every single you can't have the same rule. You need a bit of common sense, but there's not much of that going on.
But everyone protests common sense now.
But it's hard
they've got huge
because
legal fees. They'll sue.
But we live in this
dads.
We live in a world now, Tiff, where you can't say anything, and you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I do, I empathise with the FIA, but I want that consistency. But then I'm also calling out for common sense. It's really hard to get that balance.
Anyway, they had very little racing in that first Formula 3 race because they spent more time cruising around behind a safety car. However, the star of Formula 3 was Gabriel Bortoleto, Brazilian driver, who was actually in the Fernando Alonso Academy. He actually didn't do much. He came sixth in Formula Regional last year, so he wasn't exactly expected to be a superstar. But anyway, he's looked really good this year. In the sprint, he got from 12th to 7th. In the main race, he held off Gregoire Saucy. Getting to about DRS, he held off Saucy. The two of them broke away at the front. And Saucy couldn't get by. 12 laps right on his gearbox, but the DRS just wasn't, and that didn't seem to help enough in Formula 3. So Bortoleto was a star. 5 Brits, Zach O'Sullivan, the best of the Brits again. He qualified 5th and actually won the sprint race after the winner was excluded. Franco Colapinto won the sprint race, reverse grid race, but his MP Motorsport, all 3 of their cars were disqualified for having altered keels. I thought a keel was a thing on a boat.
Boat, yeah.
Anyway, something under the car. They've done a little. They've repaired them. They've repaired them not according to the "How do you repair your keel" book. So a bit of controversy there. And Zach in the main race started 5th and finished 5th. It was just a DRS train, and nobody really ever took. Luke Browning, this year's Autosport winner, he qualified 9th, and he should have won the sprint race. He got way too impatient. It was almost frustrating. He was so over the top of it was Montoya's son was leading, holding everybody up. But Luke went for a gap. He should. First time the DRS opened, he went for a gap into that really quick turn 9 on the inside, and ended up vaulting the curb up in the air, smashed down again, damaged the car. Impatience, Luke. You would have won that. He struggled, but I think he finished about 20th due to damage. In the main race, he got from 9th to 6th. He was one of a few drivers that made some progress the rest. So Luke, good racing, but Luke, calm down. That was yours to win. Johnny Edgar, 14th to 11th, 14th to Taylor Barnard, 18th to 10th. Oliver Gray, 21st to 14th. None of those 3 really having a good weekend. Mentioned Sophia Flörsch, of course, the woman girl who's fighting for the females. Qualified 25th and finished, had a 16th and an 18th. So still not superstarring, but out there having a go. So plenty of F3 action. Good to see we've got 5 Brits, one of them winning the sprint race. Aussie Supercars, the other entertainment, which I'm sure was most entertaining. I haven't seen any of that on telly.
Well, I saw, for those of you who didn't see, there was a car that came into the pits on fire, like proper
Oh, that's fire. Right. A couple of the Mustangs, wasn't it? The Fords only, I think. A couple of Mustangs. What's that word? But all 4 races are run by Camaros. So a bit of a there's going to be a bit of a balance.
You say Camaro, do you? Is it Camaro or Camaro?
I don't know. You say tomato, I say tomato. I don't know. Camaro. All 4 races won by Chevrolets. 2 of them won by a first-time winner. Brody Kostecki has become a star overnight, winning 2 of the races. Shane van Gisbergen won another, and Brock Feeney won the 4th. But the best Mustang in each race was 5th, 2nd, 4th, 6th. So Ford are going to have a balance of power complaint. Always a problem, isn't it? It's going to be there forever. But always good, entertaining racing. So the Melbourne, they had a Porsche race as well. No one had won that. Sorry, Porsche people, didn't check that out. But lots of entertainment in Melbourne. And then more trouble when they all climbed over the fence at the end and the circuit's going to get penalised. There must be a rule for that. The circuit's going to get fined.
Do you know what they call
invasion.
that? That's stupidity. I mean, it's just, what are they thinking, these guys? Come on.
What were they doing? I didn't even bother. Were they hanging the fence before the checkered flag went out? Or when did they climb?
Well, I saw various different things. Some said that it was during the racing, but they weren't going flat, but they were going fast. But I feel sorry for the circuit there because, like I said, my sister said it was just incredible. The whole thing was organised incredibly well. And
where was she watching from?
I don't know. I did not.
Did she actually see any, car go by at all, or a blur looking over someone's head?
I don't know, but the whole family were there, and half are Max fans and half are Lewis fans. So I guess they're both quite happy actually, because it was inevitable for Max, and good to see Lewis back on the podium. Let's go to Argentina, Tiff. South America.
MotoGP.
No, Susie Perry.
She got Degner, is it Degner disease?
Yeah.
Something like Degner disease.
Which is
Junkie.
dangerous to get twice. Apparently. Yeah. You know what? So she's the only guest we've ever had on this. We need to get another guest, actually. Susie Perry's the only guest I think we've ever had on this show.
She's wonderful, Susie. This drove a weird circuit out in Argentina. mean, there was brilliant racing as always. We'll talk about it in a minute, but hardly any crowd there. There were a couple of sort of scaffolding-looking grandstands I occasionally saw well away from the track with it half filled. And so this most amazing race meeting, it lacked a bit of atmosphere, to be honest. You're not having any crowd shots or any sort of, enthusiasm visible at the edge of the track. It was in a place called Termas de Rio Honda, right in the middle of South America, almost quite close to Brazil on the Argentinian border. It's a lakeside, it's got hot springs, it's like a holiday town, but obviously not many people on holiday for relaxing wanted to go watch some amazing MotoGP races. It's rather strange, no crowd.
It is.
The sprint race was epic. The Saturday in the dry, the MotoGP top class sprint race. I mean, it was 12 lap sprint. And of course, when they didn't have to worry about tyres, they could just route them and go for it. They were just overtaking everywhere, clashing shoulders. And Brad Binder, the South African on his KTM, had qualified about 15th, I think, came through the win. I mean, just unbelievable ride. He's got the biggest smiling, teethy grin, and it was wider than I've ever seen it. It was an amazing. He didn't laugh too much in the main race because he fell off in the first lap. But anyway,
winning is amazing. Well, I can only imagine. But when you don't win that often,
yeah. I think it's but it was just a brilliant race to watch. Red State. It was like Texas Indycar. It was just everything was going on everywhere from start to finish, which is what you want. But the main races, all the main races on the Sunday were in the rain. So rain everywhere, very tricky conditions. So the main MotoGP race was ended up with the battle of the Ducatis. Ducati again dominating MotoGP really. When it was all the factory satellites, because they're all up there. Because there's 3, I think, factory satellites with Ducatis, and the one factory bike, Bagnaia, the champion from last year, dropped it when running second. So he fell off. So it's left for 3 of the factory satellite teams to come fill the podium, which is quite a thing. Marco Bezzecchi won the race, and he was on the Valentino Rossi's, the VR46 team. He walked away with it. He qualified about second, I think. And his grin and his accent, he's very Valentino Rossi. So it's almost lovely to see a Valentino Rossi team win the Grand Prix. Marco's first win, and Marco speaking and sounding very much like Valentino. So that was wonderful. The French guy, Johan Zarco, came second on the Pramac satellite. And Alex Marquez, brother of Marco Marquez, also smiling a lot with a lot of teeth, came third with the Gresini Ducati. So, but it wasn't the front 3 was exciting. It wasn't that close a race for those big bikes in the wet. They were all Zarco really coming from 6th to 2nd was the story of the action, and Bagnaia dropping it. Moto2, Jake Dixon, our leading British rider. He celebrated his wife.
I was just going to say, he had a baby as well.
And when you think of the cricketers and rugby players, they're all Australia. I've got to go home. My wife's expecting this week, and they won't play in a test match. They'll sacrifice a test match.
Not all of them, Tiff. Not all of them will do that. But
Jake did. Jake was out there. I mean, also to be doing one of the most dangerous sports in the world, visibly, while your wife is giving birth, is amazing mental aptitude. And he had a fabulous day. He qualified 4th. There were 3 riders out, just had a whole race battle. Jake led for a while, but dropped to 3rd in the end. It was the Italian Tony Arbolino who came through to win from Spain's Alonso Lopez with Sam 3rd. But it was that was a really good race. Not Sam Lowes. I mean, 3rd was Jake Dixon, of course. Sam Lowes was 10th. There was other Brit, and Rory Skinner retired on about the 5th lap for no known reason. Pedro Costa, championship leader, was very quiet day. 12th, didn't seem to like his bike, wasn't good for the wet or what. You would have thought. You always think talent will shine in the wet. That's always the belief you have. But there's still setup of cars, however brilliant the rider or driver might be. He wasn't going anywhere in the wet, Pedro. So it was a good British weekend, actually, because Jake Dixon had that podium. And Scott Ogden, this young kid, we've been championing his cause for a year.
For him, yeah.
Oh, he finally didn't fall off. And he qualified 8th, and he actually sat on the sort of back of the top 10 pack. He took it sensibly, but was with the leaders all the way.
5th place?
Yeah, well, Tatsuki Suzuki disappeared, the Japanese boy, to win. But it was this pack from 2nd to 10th where Scott was in this battle of eight riders. And towards the end, you could tell he actually had more pace. He suddenly, because he sort of, and then he just closed up on the front six and then got up to fifth, I think. And we're all thinking, we're going to get a podium here, Scott. And he went for a move at the end of the long straight. And he locked the front. It was terrifying. And we actually saw it happen. And on bike in the wet, as soon as the front locks, you've got to come off the brakes.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's two riders right in front of him. So he had to release the brakes, and he shot between two riders, clobbered the one on the left who fell down, poor Riccardo Rossi. So Rossi won't be sending him a Christmas card. So he finished fourth on the road, but got a 5-second penalty or 6-second penalty for clobbering Rossi, which dropped him out to fifth. But
he was chuffed, though. I'm chuffed for him as well.
Even Josh Watley's Watley, I'll get that right one day. Watley, I would say. He had his best. He came from 28th to 15th. He doesn't seem to be able to get the pace in qualifying, Watley. But he certainly had a good race to get to 15th. So, as always, Susie's boys entertained royally in Argentina, even if there weren't many people there watching.
Great. Let's go. Where are we going next?
NASCAR.
NASCAR. Was it good? I didn't see any of it, I'll be honest with you.
There's not a lot really have to report. It doesn't really matter because the winner was,
number 5.
Number 5, Kyle Larson. What happened to the rest of the pack? I don't care what happened, really. I did go to bed before the end of that one. Having watched on Sunday, I watched Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. I watched everything. It was at a little 3/4 mile Richmond track.
Just to get it into context, how long is the Texas track?
I think that's a 1.5.
Okay.
You super speedways are 2 miles. I think the Texas is 1.5 miles.
So
that was about the only sports.
Okay.
No, that was it. What else do you have to say? I don't care what the others did.
Caterham. Let's have a chat about Caterham because I love Caterham racing. I'm not racing this season, sadly, but I watched a lot of it on the live stream. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. In fact, I never really have watched it before because I've been racing. And I watched the old Academy boys go up into road sport, and they just...
Where were they racing?
Oh, they were at Alton Park. So
okay.
You say about safety, it wasn't that long ago before they had trees lining Alton Park. And then my guys are now racing in the 270s, and I gotta say, absolutely brilliant.
What does a 270 mean? That's how much? Is that more power?
More power now. They got 135 horsepower, wider track suspension, better
So
tires.
what did the Academy start with then?
125.
Power-wise.
125.
It's only 10 more horsepower then.
It's only 10 more horsepower, but no windscreen, so you got no drag. You got better, harder suspension, so better cornering, and you've got more grip with the tires. So
but still one tire for wet and dry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, the same tire, but it's much more of a track tire.
So did your mates win?
Well, Fred Chinnix had an absolute stormer of a weekend. It was really Fred and Charlie who took all the glory. Charlie Lower, but Fred won every single race. However, he did a bit more than Max Verstappen on the first start, and he started about 10 inches or 10 centimeters in front of his grid box. Got a 10-second penalty, which put him back to I think like 8th place or something.
What about the other former champion? Wasn't he there?
No, Jeff Newman. He's hung up his Caterham Championship boots, which is a real shame because I would have loved.
Where's he gone instead? Is he racing something else?
He'll be racing for sure. He'll be doing Toyos or something like that. But it was good to see a couple of the Academy guys that skipped road sport, went straight into 270. They did really well. Matt Larby and Roger Patke. They did really well. In race 1, they fell off the pace a little bit, but my goodness, that is tough now, all the way down. You look at I mean, Mark Jones struggled in did well in the third race, but really struggled. Joe did awfully. He did really badly.
So they're using the same car, are they? Same chassis?
Yeah, you can use the same car all the way up until you get to... The only time you need to change it is on the 5th and final, which is the 420s. The 310s, you don't need to change it. And in the 310 race, actually, just wanted to pay get well soon to Roger Gaunt. Had a very, very nasty accident. His partner Helen has updated us to say that he's doing well in hospital, but he had a very, very...
Where did he go off then?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. It was late in the day. But
there are some dodgy places up Clay Hill and some dodgy places in Alton Park where you don't want to go off.
Look, it was Caterham racing. There were in all of the racing, there was lots of sort of taps, and if you do it in the wrong place at the wrong time, but also in the 310s, the first race in the 310s. Bear in mind, it's a 30-minute race. There was no safety car. and the top four finished in 0.079 seconds of each other. It was bloody amazing. I love it so much. But get well soon, Roger Gorn. Roger Gorn, our thoughts with you there. And more Caterham racing in a few weeks at Croft, I think they're going to.
You see what we like on Lovecars on the grid. Everything when it's a good racing, we smile a lot. So that's this weekend. The smiles came from Indycar, MotoGP, and Caterham's.
Well, I think Formula One was there as well, but there was certainly some exciting.
Like I said, if it had gone to the end, as I said, with that order, that was just it was a proper Grand Prix.
Good.
So that's coming next weekend now. Any more from last weekend?
That's it for me.
No more gossip. So next weekend we go from masses of international racing to hardly any. In fact, Easter weekend for you. Now, come on, if you want the British GTs at Alton Park, which is a wonderful place to go to watch motorsport. I'm not sure I think it's GB3 and GB4 follow them. Possibly, might get single. Anyway, you'll get a wonderful program of racing. You go to Alton Park. And if it's bikes, it's British Superbikes round 1 at Silverstone on the short circuit. So that's your entertainment for Easter. And internationally, the only racing is, of course, as there is every weekend, NASCAR. And this is a good NASCAR to watch. Like, some are boring, not every race, because it's this dirt race, the Food City dirt race. Because this Bristol Speedway, this is the third year they've done it. They take the Bristol Speedway is like the Colosseum of NASCAR, amazing stands, concrete stands all the way around. And it's a very 23-degree banked half-mile track. I mean, a right little fight hole. But they decided to make it a dirt race, as with midgets, you've seen dirt racing. So they take 2,500 truckloads of Tennessee clay, that's about 23,000 cubic yards, and they turn the Bristol Speedway into a Bristol dirt track. And what they have to, it's this balance, it's clay. And so you wet it down, obviously, to get the smoothness. But if it's a bit too wet, it's like ice. And then if it's dry, it's brilliant. And if it's too dry, all the dust comes up and you all crash because you can't see each other. So it's an incredibly difficult surface to run, 40 NASCARs. And they drift and slide and tap each other. And there are quite a lot of yellows. So if like with Formula 3, I was complaining there's too many yellows, there are quite a lot. Because as soon as a NASCAR spins, the yellow comes out. I mean, that's tradition. I mean, that's what you have to expect if you go to NASCAR. So anyway, so if you want a bit of laugh, it's on the Sunday. So it's on, but you've got to watch Via Play, whatever they call it now. Via Play.
Online, not on your TV. Thanks for joining us always. See you next week.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.